My name is Deborah with Prescott Valley Public Library Adult Services, and I'm going to read a cat story from James Herriot. Oscar, the Socialite Cat. One late spring evening when Helen and I were still living in the little babysitter under the tiles of the Schechtel house, Tristan shouted up the stairs from the passage far below. "Jim! Jim!" I went out and stuck my head over the banister. "What is it, Tris?" "Sorry to bother you, Jim, but could you come down for a minute?" The upturned face had an anxious look. I went down the long flight of steps, 2 at a time, and when I arrived, slightly breathless, on the ground floor, Tristan beckoned me in through a consulting room at the back of the house. A teenage girl was standing by the table, her hand resting on a stained roll of a blanket. "It's a cat," Tristan said, and he pulled back a fold of the blanket, and I looked down at a large, deeply striped tabby. At least he could have been large if he had had any flesh on his bones. But his ribs and his pelvis stood out painfully through the fur, and as I passed my hand over the motionless body, I could feel only a thin covering of skin. Tristan cleared his throat. "There's something else, Jim." I looked at him curiously. For once, he didn't seem to have a joke in him, and I watched as he gently lifted one of the cat's hind legs. There was a large gash on the abdomen and innumerable other wounds. I was shocked and staring at the girl when she spoke. "I saw this cat sitting in the dark down Brown's yard. I thought he looked skinny, like a bit quiet. I bent down to give him a pat. Then I saw he was badly hurt. I went back for a blanket and brought him round to you." "That was kind of you," I said. "Have you any idea who he belongs to?" The girl shook her head. "No, he looks like a stray to me." "He does indeed." I dragged my eyes away from the terrible wounds. "You're Marjorie Simpson, aren't you?" "Yes." "I know your dad well. He's our postman." "That's right." She gave a half smile, then her lips trembled. "Well, I reckon I better leave him here with you. You'll be going to put him out of his misery. There's nothing anybody can do about that." I shrugged and shook my head. The girl's eyes filled with tears. She stretched out a hand and touched the emasticated animal. They turned and walked quickly to the door. "Thanks again, Marjorie," I called after retreating back. "And don't worry, we'll look after him." In the silence that followed, Tristan and I looked down at the shattered animal. Under the surgery lamp, it was all too easy to see. The injuries were very serious, and the wounds were covered in dirt and mud. "What do you think did this?" Tristan said at length. "Has he been run over?" "Maybe," I replied. "Could be anything. An attack by a big dog, or somebody could have kicked him or struck him. All things were possible with cats, because some people seem to regard them as fair game for any cruelty." Tristan nodded. "Anyway, whatever happened, he must have been on the verge of starvation. He's a skeleton. I bet he's wandered for miles from home." "Oh well," I sighed. "There's only one thing to do, I'm afraid. It's hopeless." Tristan didn't say anything, but he whistled under his breath and drew the tip of his forefinger again and again over his furry cheek, and unbelievably, from somewhere in that saggy chest, a gentle purr arose. The young man looked at me round-eyed. "My God, did you hear that?" "Yes, amazing in that condition. He's a good-natured cat." Tristan's head bowed, continuing his stroking. I know how he felt, because although he preserved a cheerful, hard-boiled attitude to our patients, he couldn't kid me about one thing. He had a soft spot for cats. Even now, when we are both around the 60 mark, he often talks to me over a beer about the cat he has had for many years. It is a typical relationship. They tease each other unmercifully, but it is based on real affection. "It's no good, Tris," I said gently. "It's got to be done." I reached for the syringe, but something in me rebelled against plunging the needle into this pathetic little body. Instead, I pulled a fold of the blanket over the cat's head. Pour a little ether onto the cloth, I said. He'll just sleep away. Wordlessly, Tristan unscrewed the cap of the ether bottle and poised it above the head. Then, from under the shapeless heap of blanket, we heard it again. The deep purring, which increased in volume till it boomed in our ears like a distant motorcycle. Tristan was like a man turned to stone. Hand gripped the bottle rigidly. Eyes stared down at the mound of cloth from which the purring rose in a wave of warm, friendly sound. At last he looked up at me and gulped. I don't fancy this much, Jim. Can't we do something? You mean try to repair all of this? Yes, we could stitch the wounds bit by little bit, couldn't we? I lifted the blanket and looked again. Honestly, Tris, I wouldn't know where to start, and the whole thing is filthy. He didn't say anything, but continued to look at me steadily. And I didn't need much persuading. I had no more desire to put ether on to that purring than he did. Come on, then, I said. We'll have a go. With the oxygen bubbling and the cat head in the anesthetic mask, we washed the whole body with warm saline. We did it again and again, but it was impossible to remove every fragment of caked dirt. Then we started the painfully slow business of stitching many wounds, and here I was, glad Tristan's nimble fingers, which seemed better able to manipulate the small, round-bodied needles than mine. 2 hours and yards of catgut ladder, we were finished, and everything looked tidy. He's alive, anyway, Tris, I said as we began to wash the instruments. We'll put him on some sedatives and keep our fingers crossed that tomorrow he'll be better. There was still no antibiotics at this time, but the new drug was a big advance. The door opened and Helen came in. You've been gone a long time, Jim, and she walked over to the table and looked down at the sleeping cat. What a poor, skinny little thing. He's all bones. You should have seen him when he came in. Tristan switched off the sterilizer and screwed shut the valve on the machine. He looks a lot better now. He stroked the little animal for a moment. Is he badly injured? I'm afraid so, Helen, I said. We've done our best for him, but I honestly don't think he has much of a chance. What a shame. He's so pretty, too. 4 white feet and all those unusual colors. With her finger, she traced the faint band of auburn and gold copper along the gray and black. Tristan laughed. Yes, I think this chap has a ginger Tom somewhere in his ancestry. Helen smiled too, but absently. I noticed a brooding look about her. She hurried out to the stockroom and returned with an empty box. Yes, she said thoughtfully. I can make a bed in this box for him, and he'll sleep in our room, Jim. He will? Yes, he must be warm, mustn't he? Of course, especially with such chilly nights. Later, in the darkness of our bed-sitter, I looked from my pillow at the cozy scene. Sam the beagle in his basket on one side of the flickering fire, and the cat cushioned and blanketed in his box on the other. As I floated off into sleep, it was good to know that my patient was so comfortable, but I wondered if he would be alive in the morning. I knew he was alive at 7:30 a.m. because my wife was already up and talking to him. I trailed across the room in my pajamas, and the cat and I looked at each other. I rubbed him under his chin, and he opened his mouth in a rusty meow, but he didn't try to move. Helen, I said, this little thing is tied together inside with catgut. He'll have to live on fluids for a week, and even then he probably won't make it. If he stays up here, you'll be spooning milk into him umpteen times a day. Okay, she said, with that broody look again. It wasn't only milk she spooned into him over the next few days. Beef essence, strained broth, and a succession of sophisticated baby foods found their way down his throat at regular intervals. One lunchtime, I found Helen kneeling by the box. "We shall call him Oscar," she said. "You mean we're keeping him?" "Why, yes. I am fond of cats, but we already had a dog in our cramped quarters, and I could see difficulties. Still, I decided to let it go." "Why Oscar?" "I don't know." She dipped a few drops of chop gravy onto the little red tongue and watched intently as he swallowed. "One of the things I like about women is their mystery, the unfathomable part of them, and I don't press the matter further. But I was pleased at the way things were going. I had been giving him some medication every 6 hours and taking his temperature every night and every morning, expecting all of the time to encounter a roaring fever, the vomiting and the tense abdomen of sickness, but it never happened. It was as though Oscar's animal instinct told him he had to move as little as possible, because he laid absolutely still day after day, and he looked up at us and purred. His purr became part of our lives, and when he eventually left his bed, sauntered through to our kitchen, and began to sample Sam's dinner of meat and biscuits, it was a moment of triumph, and I didn't spoil it by wondering if he was ready for solid food. I felt he knew. From then on, it was sheer joy to watch the furry scarecrow fill out and grow strong, and as he ate and ate, the flesh spread over his bones. The true beauty of his coat shone in the glossy melody of autumn black and gold. We had a handsome cat on our hands. Once Oscar had recovered, Tristan was a regular visitor. He probably felt, and rightly, that he, more than I, had saved Oscar's life in the first place, and he used to play with him for long periods. His favorite ploy was to push his leg around the corner of the table and withdraw it repeatedly just as the cat pawed at it. Oscar was justifiably irritated by this teasing, but showed his character by lying in wait for Tristan one night and biting him smartly on the ankle before he could start his own tricks. From my own point of view, Oscar added many things to our message. May I start that line again? From my own point of view, Oscar added many things to our menagerie. Sam was delighted with him, and the two soon became firm friends. Helen adored him, and each evening I thought afresh that a nice cat washing his face by the hearth gave an extra comfort to the room.